recording started. Hi, good afternoon.
Hi, well,
I'm just going to start by, my name is Cora Landy. I'm from the ECDL Foundation. But I just want to ask each of you what areas you're from or what you teach, just so kind of I have a sense of who we've got here today. So are you a lecturer, are you a teacher, or what?
I'm an instructor.
An instructor. Okay.
I'm an instructor.
Okay.
Instructor, networking and information technology in college. Instructor, computer information systems for all. Animation.
Okay.
I'm wearing still abstract knowledge, combination administrator, instructor, whatever.
Okay, that's fine. Just want to get a sense of who we've got here today. Well, I'm going to talk about digital literacy, and I think we touched on this morning within the keynote address, the importance of digital literacy and how nowadays digital literacy is runs parallel to what we traditionally think of literacy in schools, elementary schools, secondary schools, and in college. Now, I guess, in a way, kind of somewhat preaching to the converted here, because most of you have students coming to you who are pretty digitally literate or are interested in ICT. I hear some nodding of heads here. And I do want to touch on that today. First of all, I'll talk about the ICDL Foundation, what we do, what ICDL is, and then ICDL in education, talk a little bit about what that means here in the U.S., and then I'll talk about some international examples as well, and some programs of how they've integrated digital literacy and the standard for digital literacy into education programs. And then we'll talk similarly with some case studies on workforce development, and then I'll give you some examples of what we're doing in the U.S. So the ECDL Foundation was started in Europe in '94, and how it came about was the European Commission was looking to upskill its workforce. So it wanted some kind of program that it could give to all European citizens to raise the skill level of all people. So not just in the workforce, but for the benefits of being at home, for the elderly, for all people. And so they started looking for a program that would meet those needs. And they found a program in Finland, which was kind of sort of sounded like what they wanted. So they worked on that program and developed what is now known as ICDL, International Computer Driving License, although it has nothing to do with driving a car. And that's known in Europe as ECDL, European Computer Driving License. And out of that grew the ECDL Foundation. So it's an independent non-profit, and it's a global non-profit. Our headquarters are based in Ireland, but we're all around the world. And how we work, we're a pretty small organization, but how we work is that we work with organizations in different countries. So an organization in one country would have the license to operate and run that program within a country. So it can vary, in some countries we work with the Ministry of Education, they're our partner. In other countries, UNESCO is our partner. In some other countries, it might be a for-profit organization. It just depends on the country. So we're the global governing body of ICDL. And so what we do is we develop the standard. So we develop what is considered the standard for end users. So we talked today, this morning, about that pyramid. And at the bottom of the pyramid are those end users. And so this is a standard that is used around the world to say, well, what should those end users be able to do? And again, there's that idea of the help desk and taking away some of those help desk simple things that we expect people to be able to do and increase efficiency in the workplace and in learning and education. So our mission is dedicated to raising that general awareness of digital literacy. Globally, we have 11 million candidates, so we are the world leader in kind of an end-user program. We operate in 41 languages, 148 countries around the world, and 24,000 test centers. So some of the people we work with are the European Commission, the United Nations, the UNDP, many organizations around the world. So we work from kind of grassroots organizations to governments and schools. So the foundation has a number of programs, but I think the largest program, and the one where we talk about 11 million candidates, this is the program that we're talking about. It's ICDL certification. And what that is 7 modules. The first one is basically a theory module, and then the remaining 6 are kind of practical applications. And so what the foundation does is we develop the standard that users should meet when they complete all these 7 modules. So we don't write the training programs for these. We write the syllabus and we develop the test base for these. And then we will work in conjunction with various automated testers and coursework providers around the world to be able to deliver the program. So do stop me if you have any questions for me as I go through this.
So that
Yeah.
when that word processing in spreadsheets, is that Microsoft in Europe essentially, or is it independent of any?
Well, it's independent, but the majority of people are using Microsoft. Yeah. In Latin America, open source is much more popular, but the majority of people around the world, yes, they want Microsoft. So ICDL in education, I'll give some examples in a little bit, but first when we started talking to people in the U.S., they would say to us, well, we kind of lead the world. Our kids are very digitally literate. We don't need any of these kind of programs. And then you talk to teachers, and I know I worked with teachers a lot in the U.S. I lived in Boston for 13 years, and it's a different story. I mean, I guess it depends on where you are. But, I know it's particularly in community colleges, it's got a lot of people who've been, maybe left school and in the workforce for a couple of years. Some people, they might not have even have very little computer experience when they're coming back. I have a lot of people saying to us that, well, our college is now offering online courses or blended learning. We get students who come in and they've got to start an online course straight away, and they just don't have the experience. They don't even know how to attach files. And so what a lot of lecturers are saying to us is that, we want a program that, they don't want to have to teach students these skills, but they want to be able to send them somewhere. So they want like courses that can be embedded into, other computer or basic computer programs, so that at the end they know that the students have those skills to move on to their other courses. So in terms of education, I wanted to take some examples from the Middle East. A lot of people are like, what are people doing in China? What are people doing in India? And they're very interesting, but the Middle East is also a very interesting place to look at, because the countries are making this concerted effort to really address these issues. There's a lot of American companies trying to get into the Middle East for business because they think, oh, there's a lot of money in there in the Middle East. But they're a very interesting example. They're at a kind of a pivotal place in their development at the moment, because I'll go on to my next slide so you can see. There's such a huge amount of young people in the country, and they need 100 million new jobs over the next 15 years and very high unemployment. But they're also experiencing some of the same things that we're experiencing here in the U.S. They're not getting students into the sciences, students are going into the arts, they've got low scores in international tests, high dropout rates, all of the kind of things that are being experienced here in the U.S. as well. They are very aware that they don't have the skills to compete in a knowledge economy. And so I think that what makes them different is this concerted effort to address the problem. I'm going to talk about Egypt in more detail, but here's just a little kind of detail of some of the things that they're doing. In Egypt, they are delivering certification to 1 million people so far. They're at like 1,200,000 at the moment. They've made a requirement for all teachers. In Kuwait, requirement for 8,000 employees at the Ministry of Communication. I've got some figures for just on the numbers of certifications they've done in in these countries. Like in Kuwait, 53,000, Jordan, 158,000, Saudi Arabia, 241,000, United Arab Emirates, 217,000. So I think that's actually, I know they're just kind of numbers, but I think it's interesting to look at if we could say the same thing, you know, are we going into the high school sector? Are we saying to teachers, you know, we believe you should have these skills, and this is the program we're going to help you, and we're going to address those needs. And in these countries, all of these programs are paid for these teachers. So in Egypt, we work with UNESCO. They're our partner in Egypt. They're not typically something that UNESCO would get involved in, but we sometimes need to be choosy about who our partners are and make sure that our partners have the same goals as us. And so we picked UNESCO as our partner in Egypt. So this project was a mixture of UNESCO, the Ministry of Communication, Information Technology, and CIT, and ministries in education, and there's also some ministries of development as well got involved. And so their aim is to eradicate digital literacy in their population. So over a 5-year period, they wanted to certify 1 million people, and they've done that. They're now at 1,200,000, and they're planning to continue the program. I mean, they're talking 25 million, but we kind of take a step back and go, okay, well, but they're aiming big. So they have 340 training and testing centers throughout Egypt. They do their tests in English and in Arabic. They also do Arabic Braille. They specifically make sure they get out into rural communities and also target women for these programs. And of course, all of the training and testing is free. So when they started this program, they wanted to target particular groups. So students in higher education and at the second level, like in high school, government employees and unemployed graduates, because I mentioned earlier that they had a very high rate of unemployment for graduates. For those government employees, it tended to be more women. Government does tend to hire a lot of women. A lot more men are hired in the private sector in Egypt, probably not surprising. And move on. They made it compulsory for all teachers that they had to have this certification. I think that's quite an amazing thing to actually say. And then for their students starting the academic year 2008-2009, they have to have their certification. And we actually get quite a lot of calls from students, graduate students, who have got a scholarship and they're doing some graduate program in the U.S. And then they're like, I have to have my ICDL certification. Where can I go to get my ICDL certification over here? Because it's just such a mainstay. And if you were in the country and you said ICDL, everybody knows what it is. Or the same if you were in Europe, you said ECDL, everybody knows what that standard is. They've done an impact assessment on this project. One of the things that they found was that for the unemployed graduates, that within 5 months of doing the program, 35% of them got jobs. And again, it's sort of like what we talked about in all areas, all fields, that you send your students out and they have the stuff on paper, but it's those other job skills that employers are looking for that, they expect you to come out with a degree, the associate's degree. So it's all those other things that they want. Yes?
Approximately how long does the program take?
Okay. Yep, I can go into that with it depends on how you run the program. So I'll go into that a little later. But the website that I've listed there just has so much information on this. I mean, if you wanted to find out more about, they've put together a whole booklet about how they do the implementation of this, how they organize the government, how they, made certain departments key people in it. So it's an incredibly comprehensive study. And
Is it in English?
yes, yeah, and I have a PDF version of it. So if you want, just come up to me at the end and give me your email address, and I can email it to you. Okay, so I'll go on a little bit about workforce development. And again, ICDL is something in many countries, it's a standard. Workforce development agencies, if you went into them and you said, I need a computer skills, this would be what you're doing. I put in a few slides here about the value of digitally literate employees to an organization, but I'll just run over a couple of the points. I guess the major one is increasing efficiency. It says here, that you get happier and more confident employees. Not sure really how much, in the job market at the moment, employers are worried about that, but certainly when the economy was better, yes, they did want to hang on to, employees. Why ICDL certification? Well, I guess for most of the employers, it gives them a benchmark. The UN, I have a slide about this coming up, but in the UN, in New York, they use ICDL, and they're considering putting it in their job applications. So, when they're saying we want, employees who have a certain standard, this is what we need. For training, again, for anybody who does training, it's a benchmark against, what to train to. For teachers, for college lecturers, it's something they put maybe at the end of their course. If you were in Europe, many of the countries around the world, high school students and college students, as a matter of par for course, they will do their certification. It's just one more thing that they do as part of their program. Sorry, I skipped it. Over that quickly. It won't seem to stick on it, but the other slide was a number of return on investment studies, which again I can get to you if you're interested. Most of the return on investment studies were done kind of like 2003, 2004. And they haven't really done too many more of them because they were, employers and governments were already convinced. They've seen enough studies that they actually know they get a return on investment. This is the ALBA Graduate Business School study. It's from Greece. And so this is kind of the most recent one that's been done in 2010. And what they did is they looked at 4 areas: word processing, spreadsheets, presentations, and databases, and worked out the dollar per week saving for each employee after they gained their certification, and then dollar per year. So you can see, on databases, $1,792. That's a pretty big figure. So if you multiply that by X number of employees, that's quite a big figure. The actual report gives it in euro. Just converted it over to dollars, but we're going to be making this available. It's actually a huge, big study with the methodology, so we're condensing it and writing like a short report, and that will be available on our website soon. So 2 examples that I want to talk about are how they've used the certification in workforce development in Singapore and in Ireland. So in Singapore, ICDL had been around for about 5 or 6 years, and they had certified about 200,000 people. And it was very well known by the SNEF, which is the Singapore National Employers Federation. They had used it in some of their training programs, and so it was a pretty established program at this stage. In 2008, when the economy started on the downhill slide, Singapore was one of the first Asian countries to really be hit by that. And they're very aware of needing to get foreign investment into the country. And so they decided, you know, they have a very outward-looking, I guess, proactive approach to trying to make people aware of the need for IT skills in everyday life and to, you know, actively go out and do something about that. So the SPUR program they came up with, which is a bit of a mouthful, the Skills Program for Upgrading and Resilience, was a national enhanced funding program that was offering ICDL. And I think one of the most amazing things is how they managed to get 3 different groups working together. I can't imagine, you know, well, I can't imagine it happening in Ireland where we're headquartered, but, you know, in most countries, getting major organizations to work together, you know, to have the same goal is pretty amazing. So they work with the workforce development agencies, the National Trade Union Congress, and then the National Employers Federation. And the Workforce Development Agency there is extremely strict, has very strict standards about, you know, what can become a test center and, you know, what kind of programs they're delivering. So for their test centers, they have to have, their trainers have to have 5 to 8 years experience. They have to have 0 complaints. They have to have all good feedback. I know, it's like, who has that? You know, all good feedback from the candidates that they train. All good audits with absolutely no problems. So they picked 4 test centers and they re-audited those again, and they made those kind of the national training centers for delivering the ICDL. So for employers, you can basically almost send your employees for free to the course. 90% of the course fee is paid for, up to Singapore dollar, $11 per hour. And then enhanced absentee payrolls, in other words, your employer is reimbursed for the time that you're missing. So last year they did 6,400 certifications under the program. So you might think it might be a little bit more, but, you know, it's a small country, it's a small population, and again, the program very well recognized. Running alongside this, they had an e-productivity campaign, again, to make the whole nation aware of the importance of ICT skills, the importance of everybody having digital literacy skills. How it increases productivity, and, you know, how it's a gain for their nation. And again, the awareness among the general population of the need to get foreign investment into the country. And they've had an international conference on e-productivity just last year. In Ireland, as you can imagine, since the foundation is headquartered in Ireland, along with, I might add, actually, like Google's European headquarters and Intel and eBay, they're headquartered in Ireland as well. So not just us. FOSS is the kind of equivalent in Ireland of the Workforce Development Agency. And it has run 50,000 candidates through the program. So they run national training centers all around the country. They also run training programs in like your library. So if you wanted to do a computer program, you could go down to the National Library and take it there in the evening time, and that would be funded and paid for by FOSS. They've been doing it since 1997. And even in the boom time, when things were good, 70% of the program was funded. So for employees that already had jobs, they were looking to take ICDL to, you know, for upward mobility in companies or to move to different companies. For part-time unemployed, you know, it was kind of getting full-time employment, or for some people getting back into the workforce if they've been out of the workforce for a long time. Again, free to the unemployed, and a combination of either tutor-led, so you could go into a center, and if you couldn't make it down to a center, they have a portal. The FOSS has its own portal where you can go and you can do online training courses. And as I said, 50,000 people so far. In the U.S., we're probably pretty small in the U.S., but growing. We have 56 test centers, and we're sort of taking an approach where we have pilot states. So we came to Pennsylvania first, and it was through an IBM employee. There was an IBM employee had been over in Ireland and had heard about the program and kind of thought, actually I know some communities in the Pennsylvania area that could do with a program like this. And she was the one who first brought the program over. So we're in Pennsylvania, Ohio, New York, and California. We had, a number of years ago, we had quite a number of colleges in the Bay Area doing the program. And that seems to have fallen off a bit in the last few years. So we're hoping to kind of get that back and get some energy back into that and maybe understand a little bit more about what the needs are at the moment for the community colleges in the area. We've done about 40,000 people so far certified. I'm going to talk about some of the case studies here in the U.S., the United Nations Terminal Business College in Ohio, how they're using it, and the state correctional facilities in Pennsylvania. Checking on my time. So as I said, it's used in the UN. When the United Nations in New York were looking for a program, they looked to Geneva, the United Nations in Geneva, and they had already been using the ICDL program. So they wanted something that kind of, was international, had international standards, was, already recognized, endorsed by employers, and was less commercial than some of the other products that are out there. So most of the staff in the UN who are taking it, they have a very international staff, but they are all U.S. citizens. They do the test through English, because that's the main language of the UN. It's not mandatory, but they do recommend that you take it. Managers will take it. It's most popular among administrative staff in the UN, the staff, again, who want to kind of stay within the UN and kind of move up the ranks. Now, as to your question about how they teach it, well, it depends on, who you are and how you want to teach it. From my perspective in the foundation, it's a standard, and there are a test for every single module. So there are 7 modules, and there's a 45-minute test at the end of each of those modules. Now, the level of training that one might need before you sit that test varies. For the UN, they run 5 half-day programs for what they call the START certificate. So there's 7 modules altogether, and they use a START certificate, which are any 4 modules. So they can tailor it to, say if they have employees who are going to be using databases, then they'll choose databases and the other modules that are most applicable to them. So that's how they're using it. They have their own online courseware, and how we bundle things in the U.S. for the U.S. market. Here in the U.S., they seem to like having everything together, so they don't want to go out and look for courseware. So, if you can't use the program, we will bundle diagnostic tests, and online courseware for you. They're planning on doing a return on investment study this year, so once we have that, we can publish it online on our website for you. Trumbull Business College in Ohio is a very small college. It's in the Warren-Youngstown area of Ohio, which was a steel town area. And so typically, since the 70s, they had lost half of the jobs that they had in their communities. They offer 5 of the 7 associate degree programs. Students can only access once they have done their ICDL. What they do, how they get the program in, is they roll it into the cost of their tuition, the students' tuition. And since most of the students that are in the college can access some kind of state funding, they make it kind of a credit-bearing course. and that way the students can get funding covered for it. And I guess that's one of the questions that's most asked is, how can we bring the course in, integrate it into what we're already offering, and yet get funding for it, because students, especially at the community college level, they can't afford to pay for any more courses or an additional certification. Now, one thing that's quite interesting about this example is that the director of the school found that he was putting it into a kind of an intro to computers course. And he found that at the end of the course, most of the students could pass the course as set by, their teachers, and yet they couldn't pass the certification at the end of the course. So what it has in effect become, it's become a standard for the teachers now to teach to. So they have a syllabus. They will use online courses that we have and any additional materials that they want to add to it. And so now, most of these courses, students can't access until they've actually reached this certificate level. And I think it does take a commitment from, like this director of this school has really made a commitment to drive the school forward and improve the standards at the school. And he said to me, I guess what most of the kids don't understand is, they're not getting jobs in the local community. There are no jobs in their local community. The kids are going to have to travel an hour and a half to the biggest city. And what they don't get is that the standard at the biggest city is, it's not what kind of they're expecting. I think the kids are going into the market not knowing what's expected of them. And so he feels he can offer them a program that he knows is to an international standard, and so that when they walk into the workforce, they are actually going to have skills that they're going to need for a job.
So. And then you said the students were passing their instructors tests, but they weren't passing.
Yeah.
So it's being dumbed down.
Yeah, that's the thing. He found that the instructors were dumbing down their courses, for their students to have good pass rates. And yet, when he brought this program in, I think in part it's, the instructors, not always intentionally dumbing it down, but sometimes they need something to work to and to know what is the standards out there. When you look at some of the other programs, like there are other programs like MOS programs out there, what they tend to be is experts in certain areas. So a new product will come out and you become like an expert in that field and it's the new additional buttons and things that they put on it. But there's a difference between that and actually going into a workplace and knowing, well, what are the skills I'm going to have to use in a job? What are those basic skills?
So I'm assuming, because the curriculum can't get updated constantly, I'm sure you have cycles to update, that there has to be a certain amount of theory of how to apply, so it's not just today's tool.
Yeah. I mean, now we're using syllabus version 5 we're on now. But we're already working on, for 2 to 3 years down the line for syllabus version 6. And we work with subject matter experts around the world to develop that. So it is international in its scope because it's coming from people. But yeah, I mean, we're planning down the road. Yeah. And as like the foundation, we don't develop the courseware that goes with that. We don't develop the testing that goes with that. In most of the countries that we work in, it's become a sustainable kind of industry in most countries, which is why kind of I think that people like the World Bank and the UN like to work with us because, for Egypt, for example, a lot of other Middle Eastern countries, it's, local businesses that are developing those testing systems and the courseware. Now, what we will do as the foundation is we will look at those testing systems, the courseware, to make sure that they are compliant. We don't endorse certain products over others. We will make sure that they're compliant.
The content itself is also developed by businesses as opposed to, say, universities? So the content of the model, because the testing and the systems are being developed by local businesses, but...
Not by local businesses, but it might, well, yeah, I mean, it could be kind of like a a tester in Sweden or a tester in Switzerland or, you know, Egypt. They will develop their own testing platform. Yeah. And then you might have another organization that will choose their courseware. So, you know, in some countries, they can go in and they can handpick, like, well, I want this testing in this language. You know, I'll take this courseware that's available. In the U.S., we found that most people do not want to go off and look for those various. They want everything just together. They want, like, say, I want the testing and I want the courseware, and, you know, and the test all in one package.
Publishers are doing that in the U.S.
Yeah, it's the way most people prefer things kind of delivered to them. Yeah. Okay. So I was going to mention as well that growth in online courses, and in Trumbull, which is a very small college, like 425 students, they're growing from 12 online courses last year to 100 in 2011. And are very well aware that, you know, again, some of the students coming in are just not going to be ready to take some of these courses. So for many of you, I guess some of your students are, you know, digitally literate, but I'm sure that for some of your you know, co-workers who are teaching other courses and have to teach online courses, that, you know, this is probably something that some of their students could absolutely use.
Yeah, I wonder if there's a little bit of a difference between, I think, and I'm not sure the way you use digital literacy versus the ability to take a class online of digital literacy, because that requires sort of a behavioral thing to be effective in an online environment. We find a lot of our young students aren't really ready for that. They kind of need the social pressure. They need eyes on them.
Well, I think that
you call that digital literacy.
No, we don't call that digital literacy. But what we can say from hearing from what, you know, some college lecturers are telling us is that those actual technical skills the students don't have. You know, they may not have the behavioral skills, you know, whether that's just maturity or, you know, but they don't have the technical skills. And yet, at the same time, if you talk to people, they're like, oh, our kids know how to download music, and yep, that's sort of a slightly different thing, because guess what? Your employer is not going to be asking you to download music, you know? Well, you have a very unusual employer. I did work for a .com company for a year that had an entire server dedicated to music. So you did actually need to know how to download music, but that was slightly unusual. Another example is the Pennsylvania Department of Corrections. And they've actually been using the program for quite some time. You know, we don't want it to become a program that says, where were you incarcerated, if you've got your ICDL certification. But, you know, especially in terms of workforce development, giving you know, inmates or prisoners skills that can help them, you know, turn their life around is really important. And we know there's been many reports on kind of, you know, the benefits of education to inmates and helping kind of close this door to recidivism, and, you know, that's been very well researched. But Richard Lisley, the curriculum coordinator for all of Pennsylvania, when he came to us, you know, he's very clear. They wanted something that was internationally acknowledged, something that was already endorsed, again, by employers, and because he saw it, you know, as a valuable document for them. And many of them are quite proud when they get their ICDL certification. So they did a pilot project at first in 2006, which is 42 inmates. And it is now, since 2007, available in all 26 institutions across Pennsylvania. So 3,000 inmates certified to date. I think the benefits for them, according to Richard, is, you know, it really does actually motivate them. Most of them, when they're taking the program, they'll take it within 3 years of their release date. Now, they don't have to be within 3 years of their release date, but I guess that is when they're, you know, they're starting to think about getting out. They're starting to think about kind of what they might do when they get out of prison. They'll sit down with a career guidance officer who will actually, you know, go through kind of their options with them. They have to have their GED. That's not anything to do with us. That's the curriculum coordinator in the prison. It's one of his stipulations that they have their GED. The average reading age is like 9th grade in the prison system, and they have no problem with kind of the program. What they've done is they've integrated into their business education program. Their business education program used to have things like, theory of law in it, and bookkeeping, and accounting. What they've done is they've done away with those areas of the business programs, and kind of in line with more kind of CTE programs, they brought in more practical applications. And so this, for them, this kind of fit right in with what they wanted to achieve. It's funded centrally by the Departments of Corrections. Although some of the trainers there kind of think, no, well, I think maybe we should make them pay for some of it, to really give them some motivation to pass. The actual implementation of it is sort of interesting because, even though they really want to give the inmates these skills, they're also so security conscious that they're afraid of them having it on, tests online. So an automated testing system, you do your tests online and you automatically get your scores, etc., but they don't want that in the prison. So when I was over there just a couple of months ago where we were training some of the trainers, and what they had been doing up to this was they were printing out books with like pictures of the computer screens on them. And they would like have the question, how would you go save a document? And they would have to circle the file save. So we're kind of like, well, you don't actually need to do that. You could do it all on the computer and just have the trainers actually do the testing. So I think with many programs within prisons, there's issues you have to work through. Sometimes I think it's just a lack of understanding from the top about, what kind of this actually means. But so, anything to do with the internet, those modules the prisoners are not going to be able to test on. So the 4 modules that they do are spreadsheets, databases, presentation skills, and word processing. For the prisoners, it's between 75 to 150 hours of a training program, taken over a year. Some, it'll be a lot less, others, perhaps more. That just depends on the person and where they're starting from. They've recently switched over to syllabus version 5, and as I said, we're already preparing for syllabus version 6. In the U.S., I think I'm pretty much on time. I mentioned there are other programs out there, other programs out there, but a lot of them won't actually give you their syllabus. So, especially if you're trying to plan a course, you're kind of like, well, how do I know kind of what the standard is if you actually show me what the syllabus is? Our syllabus is available online, so you can download it. So even if you just want it for your own program to kind of something to benchmark to, you can download the syllabus. Access to the courses, if your students were doing the ICDL certification, it's all through the ICDL US website. So you go there and you get login details and you access your diagnostic tests from there and your courseware and your certification tests. If you wanted to have a look at some demo tests, if you go to the Foundation website, ECDL.org, there's a whole section on program information, and there's demo tests available there, and you could just, play around with those. The automated testing in the U.S. is provided by a company called Enlight, and the courseware is provided by a group called L&K, and that's online courseware. But even though everybody says they want online courseware, people always want a book as well, and so we're going to have books printed for those people who still like to carry that book around with them.
I have a question.
Yep.
Worldwide, would you say, what percentage do ICDL in a classroom as opposed to online? Or do you know it?
I don't know that. I would say the majority is in the classroom. The numbers online are growing, but that's a good thing. I should find that out.
Classroom lab.
Yes, classroom lab, like with tutor led. Yeah. Yes, yes, yes. You know, in many kind of European schools, it would be done at a secondary school level, and so they would all have instructors. This is just kind of a picture of the homepage of ICDL US, and so you would just go to, there's a link to candidate login and registration, and you just put the username and password in there, and you get access to the tests and to the courseware. This is just if you logged in, if you were an administrator in your school, just kind of a little image of what kind of it looks like. You know, you could list your classrooms there. You would have full functionality. You'd be able to administer tests to the students. You can administer diagnostic tests. A lot of people like to do diagnostic tests at the start of their, before they teach their classes, a kind of a pre-post test kind of thing. The diagnostic test will give you full reports, of course, on, what areas your students are lacking in. So you can do kind of like an individual report on what areas they're low in if you wanted to tailor your teaching to, certain areas. And that also maps back to the courseware as well. So in other words, you have your syllabus item, it could be like 5.3.2, and you can map that on the diagnostic of maybe where your students kind of need to build up their skills, and then that maps directly to the courseware. So it kind of just, as an instructor, it just makes it a little bit easier for you. And for the student logging in, they would just kind of see kind of a catalog of all the resources that are available to them, the diagnostic test and the certificate test. Now, the certificate test, even though it's online, they must be taken in a proctored environment. They're quite strict standards, about kind of testing centers, and you would get an invigilator key. You'd work with us. We would kind of issue an invigilator key to you to start the test. So even though it's online, it's proctored. I've got 5 minutes left for questions. I do have a kind of a little chart just there about some of the kind of organizations we've worked with around the world. Of course, this could be in different countries like IKEA, and Philips, and Exxon, like Cyprus. There's many. There's almost too many to kind of go through. So does anybody have any questions for me? Yes.
If we wanted to include this thing as part of the course, is there a charge per student, or how is the payment?
Yeah, I mean, now the payment is different in different countries, because it just depends on kind of the overheads of, again, if it was something like workforce development, it's cheaper, if the government's paying for it.
In our community college, how is it paid?
No, I think the cheapest that would be delivered to a community college will be in around the $120 mark. And that would cover 7 diagnostic tests, 7 certificate tests, and your online courseware. And also, students have, not for you planning your courses, but in terms of the foundation, students have like a 3-year window to do all the 7 modules. So in other words, that kind of, we're planning for when skills develop, so like in 2.5 years' time, let's say syllabus 6 is going to be coming out. And so, we would give students a window of time, where they to finish the certification. So it's actually a very reasonable price if you benchmark it against similar products that are on the market.
Is that per student?
That's per student.
Per student.
Per student, yeah.
Do they only get to get one?
A module, if they sit the exam and fail it, yes, they would need to pay. They can pay for that individual test again, and I think it might be about like $10 for the test again, for that one test for that module that they failed. So they wouldn't need to do the entire thing again.
Is there practical exams?
Yes.
Or are they multiple choice?
It varies depending on in the U.S.
Are they practical or are they multiple choice?
No, they're practical. Yes, they have to actually.
So there's got to be versions.
Yes. So maybe 2003 or 2007. 2010 is coming out now. I think most people are using 2007 though.
they're on the Microsoft products then?
Yes, that's what most people are looking for is Microsoft products, yeah. And this is for Enlight. At the moment, Enlight are providing the testing. However, that doesn't mean that we won't partner with other groups to provide testing. Like the Enlight tests are in English at the moment, but if you had a demand for Spanish, we can partner with another ATS provider if there's a need for that.
Can the coursework be purchased separately?
No, at the moment we have an agreement with a coursework provider to bundle it, because that was kind of what the market actually was looking for, is that the majority of people wanted the courseware with it, and so we bundled it with it.
So you have a lot of U.S. companies that are companies that are in the U.S. and maybe.
Yeah, I would say mostly companies who are in the U.S.
Are you using for overseas? CDL, is that it? Or, I'm sorry, I'm trying to remember back to your slide where you said U.S. and all I can remember is Trumbull, but I know there was several others, and of course Pennsylvania.
Yep. Well, we're pretty small in the U.S. at the moment compared with other countries. But you know, it is growing. So like DHL might use it overseas. They're not using it here at the moment, but you know, we still believe, you know, that they should be using it here. So, but we have a lot of experience.
HP.
Yep, HP.
Oh, they're sponsored the company and teachers sponsored by the industry, somebody to
I think there's always.
Because I think maybe it's just not well known here.
Yeah, and I think that's a little difficulty that we were chatting about this earlier, is that, you know, we talk here about, well, you know, we want our students to cope with, like, you know, a global marketplace, and yet we're not sure we want them to actually be able to compete and use the same standards. We'll just invent our own standards, you know. So, you know, I guess if we truly want our students to be able to compete in the global environment, we should start looking at what the global market is actually using. So, but thank you very much, and please come up to me afterwards if you have any more questions. Thank you.